Welcome to cleveland.com's the second edition of the boys basketball boys basketball show. I'm your host Mark Kern with David Cassilo and Tim Bielik. Guys, Friday started the season, and for some local teams, obviously with football, a lot of teams were winning and going to those state titles, but for a lot of local basketball teams, there was a chance to really get their state run started, and I think a lot of local teams definitely had some terrific performances against some nation powerhouses. Tim, what team stuck out to you?
Well, let's start with number one VASJ going out of that Marshall County Hoop Fest and taking care of Archbishop Carroll. They had a fourth quarter comeback. Carlton Bragg, big game, 25 points, 13 rebounds. Really great showing down there against a nationally ranked team like Archbishop Carroll.
Dave?
I'm going to go with Garfield-Heights knocking off Gonzaga from D.C. 2-point win. Willie Jackson hits a shot at the buzzer. I just think that's a game that they wouldn't have won last year, and I think it shows you how much different this Garfield-Heights team is, and they can do a lot of damage this year.
Definitely, Willie Jackson showed he could be a player that we will be talking about a lot throughout the season, and we will actually be joined by VASJ coach Babe Kwasniak in a couple minutes, so stay tuned to that. And then let's go talking about that player. Dave, what player really stood out to you this weekend?
I'm going to say Anthony Christian of Archbishop Hoban. He was just terrific. 32 points, playing Kenmore, which isn't exactly a powerhouse, but still, he's a player as a junior that I think is going to take a huge leap this year and be on sort of a national radar.
All right, Tim?
And I got to go with Brandon Peters of Warrensville Heights. You know, we talked last week about how much they would mesh together, Brandon Peters and Uvari Hall. Instead, Peters goes off for 30 points against Shaw. Tremendous opening game statement for the Tigers.
All right, guys. Division I defending state champions St. Edward started their conquest to defend it and win the second in a row. Defeated Bedford by 5 points, but it was really a struggle. They were up 21. Bedford was able to come back, Dave. Is that game show maybe Bedford could be a little better than people thought, or St. Edward still got some things to figure out?
I think it says a little more about Bedford. I think it's one of those cases where it's first game of the season, maybe it takes you a little to wake up, playing the defending champs, maybe a little in awe for a little, but once they knew, hey, we're down 21 points here, we got to come back, they did it. They turned it down to a one possession game with under a minute to go. I think if they play that way the whole game, they win that game.
All right, and Tim?
I think it's more of a detriment to St. Edward's depth at the end there, but it is game one. There's obviously a long way to go with that. St. Ed's probably got some guys on the football team that are going to bring up to add some depth to that team. And again, as we saw, for example, with Menard last year, it took them a while to get going after their state championship run, and I'm sure St. Ed's will, especially getting the win. It's not like a bad thing for St. Ed's. So just see where they pick up from here and see if they can keep going forward and get some more momentum.
All right, guys, you kind of hinted at Garfield Heights, VASJ, got some very good wins in their opener. What was maybe another team that wasn't playing a high-profile team that kind of showed you guys something in the first game?
I'm going to go with Cleveland Heights. This is a team that has a bunch of freshmen and sophomores, and they beat Euclid, not road game, but conference game. And freshman Yael Hill, he's a really good point guard. He starts off at 18 points, which is tough to do as a freshman, so I was impressed.
Tim?
And I got to go with Lake Catholic beating Gilmore, who was one of our better teams last year, beat them by 60 this year, on this past weekend, excuse me. And, I mentioned Justin Robinson last week about how I think he's being an impact player. He didn't even lead their team in scoring on Friday night, so I think that was a question with Lake Catholic, was how they support Justin Robinson. I think that win proves that, they had the ability to do that.
All right, and you guys right there talked about teams that surprised you in a good way. What are some teams that have you guys wondering if they're as good as you thought, or what do they need to do to get better? Tim?
I'm going to go with Glenville, one of our teams that dropped out of the poll this week. They had that loss at Lakewood, and it was a 27-4 second quarter that really, was a bit of a struggle for the Tar Bulldogs. We know Lakewood is a team that can score points in bunches, and they certainly did that on Saturday. Maybe we overlooked Lakewood a little bit, but Glenville does have some things they need to work on.
I'm going to go with Bedford. I know they played well, and I was just sort of praising them for the way they came back again against Eds. But until they win one of those big games, there's always going to be that doubt, can they win a big game? So they got Warrensville Heights on Friday, so that's another chance.
All right, guys, who's the best three-point shooter in the area?
I really like Wes Gearhart of Lakewood. He's, I think last year he had 11 or 12 threes in a game. I mean, he just fires away, and when he gets hot, he's really hot.
I got to go, again, Devin Stover, a second week in a row. I mentioned it, but, I feel like he's got a very good-looking shot. He's a lefty three-point shooter, which at high school is very hard to defend against. It's just something you don't see, and he's made big shot after big shot early on in his high school career.
And you kind of hinted at it, Dave. Lakewood has shown last year in the game against North Royalton, if they catch fire from threes, they can really play with anybody. And with last week being the state football playoffs, obviously a lot of guys who are going to be important on the basketball court haven't been on the court yet. Who's a football player that once they get back, Tim, you really think could become a star in basketball as well?
Going Justin Lane to Benedictine, the Bengals are looking for a guy to really emerge this year, and I think Justin Lane's going to be that key guy for them, as they get the season started shortly.
I'll go Jalen Harris to Cleveland Heights. Cleveland Heights has a lot of guards, but they need some size right now, and that's what they're waiting for.
I like your pick, Tim. He kind of showed in the open field he can get going and could definitely create some havoc in the transition game. And now we are actually joined by Villa Angela St. Joseph coach Babe Kwasniak. How you doing, Coach?
Hey, how's it going?
Not too bad. Obviously, you guys were able to get a huge win this weekend. Just talk about what playing these first games against some of the top talent in the country can do for you guys going forward.
I'm sorry, Mark. I didn't hear that question.
Yeah, no problem. You guys were able to go get a huge win this weekend against a tough non-local team. Just talk about how these preseason tournaments and playing those teams from across the country can really help you guys come February and March.
Well, in the high school situation, it's not a deal. It's not like football, Mark, where it's not like if you lose, it hurts you. I mean, basically you're playing 22 preseason games to when it matters most. I mean, I even learned, through a lot of these prep schools and national competition. I mean, a lot of these schools will actually avoid teams because they don't want to, mess up the ranking and not get in the Dick Sporting Good national tournament. So, fortunately, in our deal with Ohio High School Athletic Association basketball, like you're basically trying to play the best, and we've always had that philosophy here that we're gonna play the best and get better. And if you look at our schedule historically, put our schedule up against anybody.
Coach, it's Dave here.
Hi, Dave.
How are you doing, Coach?
Good. Heard you guys talking about 3-point shooters, man. I got my guy's got at least get a mention. He can stroke it. The Texador kid. He's as good of a shooter as I ever coached. He
is. We're looking forward to seeing him. Coach, on Friday you start conference play. You got Holy Name. Could you talk about your conference as a whole? I mean, there's potential there could be 3 state champions in that one division.
Until you jinxed us, there was. So yeah, it's very good, Dave. Last year I said St. Thomas Aquinas was going to make a run at the state championship. I know Coach Hack really well. He's a good buddy of mine. People kind of laughed at me, and once I got down to Columbus, people weren't laughing anymore. I mean, it's very good. Central Catholic is as talented as anybody in the city, and obviously, Holy Name is very well coached, and I understand they got a pretty good freshman in, and the Johnson kid's a senior, and from top to bottom, it's just a very good conference.
Hey, Coach, this is Tim. When people look at your team, obviously the first player they mention is Calden, but Brian Parker is a guy I'm most excited to see this year. Last year he was a Division III Co-Player of the Year. How much have you seen him grow even more entering his senior season?
Yeah, Timmy's grown up a lot as far as just in terms of leadership, and this weekend was because we had goals to kind of get on the national scene and actually win a game. I don't know who Dave was just talking about. I think it was Bedford who's very good, and the same thing applies to our team. You can't just play close games and expect to and expect to be in the game. You got to actually get those wins. And for Carlton and Brian, I mean they just had so many individual accolades, and once you have a Division I scholarship, I mean that's the good part about signing early. Then you can just focus on what really matters, which is winning. And I've always felt like the best guys. I said this 2 years ago to Dwayne Gibson, you're going to be judged on whether we win or lose. And said the same thing to Dwayne Gibson and DeMonte Flanagan 2 years ago, and we were able to get it done. So the best players, I think even college coaches undervalue that. Go to the state championship and see the kids that were there. The best example I can think of are the two St. Ed's kids last year, the Hamilton kid and the Viancha kid. I think they were both kind of undervalued for the type of for the fact that they were winners.
All right, Coach, and we actually now have a question for you from a commenter, Vikings fan for life. And obviously you guys have a ton of very, very talented seniors, but he wants to know, tell him a little bit about some of the underclassmen who could play a role on this team down the line.
Well, we have a freshman by the name of Gene Higgins, who we have a key injury. Trayvon Williams, who's our quarterback, has a high ankle sprain. It's just kind of a nagging injury. So this weekend, we're playing the 17th ranked team in the country, and you put a freshman and Mo Johnson got in some foul trouble, and we had to insert him for about 10 or 11 minutes. And he admitted it. He's a humble kid. He said, "Coach, I've never been so nervous in my life," and he gave us some really, really, really solid minutes. And the fact that probably had our biggest regular season win in a long time. Let's just put it that way. I mean, the last time we beat a national ranked team was 1984. We beat Kent McKinley when they were first in the country. And Hagen, he just was solid. Didn't make any mistakes. And I think I don't want to put him in the Tony Miller, Reggie Adams, London Fletcher category yet, but I think he's going to be really special.
Coach, you touched on it a little. I know that if there's any coach out there who really doesn't want to pay attention to the rankings, it's you. But just the importance of beating a team like Archbishop Carroll, and then having yourself now in the Max Preps top 25.
Yeah, Dave, I didn't see that until you tweeted it, and just here's the thing. I mean, like you said, the rankings are subjective, so I've never been a big fan. But I'll tell you this: team rankings, because it's a team sport, should always supersede individual rankings. And the first thing I did was I got my phone out and I showed Carlton this morning and said, this is something you should be proud of, because this is. I mean, you obviously weren't the only part of this, but you were a key part of it. And he had a big smile on his face because, Carlton's always been individually ranked in the country, but the fact that, he had a part in getting our team ranked for the first time since I was here in 1994. That's pretty cool. I'll actually probably even mention it to our guys today, Dave, because you know what? I mean, you look at that list, Dave, right? It's all prep school. Let's face it, if we go undefeated, it'd be a heck of an accomplishment with our schedule. So there's probably, it's not impossible, but it's not probable. So this probably won't, doubtfully whether it will last the whole year. So the fact that we're in that, with a bunch of really good prep schools, and we were able to see a lot of those teams this weekend, and they're really, really good. And we play them Arlington Country Day and Oak Hill, and not to mention the great teams we play in the area, the Eds, the Ignatiuses, and the Akron St. V. So, and like you said, our conference. So you know what? We'll take it. It was a great weekend, and I'm proud of what we accomplished.
All right, Coach, one final question before we let you go. Coming from Kansas, I couldn't believe the talent here in Ohio. Just talk about so many special players here.
Yeah, I think I've told this story before, Mark, and I told it when Dave came here to walk around the school. I worked at St. James Academy for a guy named Andy Kolecki, who was a great mentor and great friend of mine, and he would say it all the time. If we had one kid go, Division I, I mean, they'd almost throw a parade in the city. And the fact that on my team this year I have three Division I kids, and probably four. I think Simon Texador shoots the ball so well. I think that's just a skill set where later in the year, if we have a good enough year, I do think he'll get something because he's really been working hard. So you have one in the area in Kansas City was a big deal, and then we're gonna have possibly four on one small school in Cleveland. It's definitely a big deal. And like I said before, the coaching in Cleveland is just so stout. It's hard to out know a coach there. And there's so many really good high school basketball coaches, and there's so many coaches here who probably could be coaching in college. And makes it, I don't know if you can relate it to, like the SEC in football or, the ACC in basketball. I mean, it's just a tough grind, and it's good basketball.
All right, Coach, congratulations on the big win, and best of luck going forward.
Hey, thanks, guys. Last thing I want to do is, Coach Finati over at St. Ed's is a St. Joe grad and a good friend of mine, and I want to publicly congratulate him on getting that done and winning a state championship.
All right, thank you very much, Coach.
All right, take care. Bye, State. Later.
All right, guys, and obviously VASJ, a huge win. So let's talk about that poll a little bit. Obviously, Dave, not a whole lot of change this week. Most of the top teams did a very good job and took care of business. Who are a couple teams that joined in?
Well, we now have Lakewood, who we talked about earlier, and John Hay. Lakewood just really put the hammer down on Glenville. They won by, what was it? I think it was about 40 points at the end of the day. So they're a team that lost a lot from last year, but seemed to be picking up where they left off. And then John Hay strong team out of the Senate. They won their first game. They were on the edge right before the season, so now they move into 25.
All right, Tim, obviously those two teams joined the poll. Who were a couple teams who fell out of the poll?
Well, Glenville fell out of the poll after that loss. Obviously it was a difficult loss for them going into Lakewood. It's just that time of the year in the early season when you're getting things figured out with a Glenville team that has some question marks, and then Stowe falling to Green in the opener as well. That was kind of an interesting game because Green was one of the teams I think was kind of in the next tier to get in. So they're on the fringe. I think that's a team that can move up. And Stowe is a team that we knew was kind of young coming in, had a lot of key parts to replace. So, that's a team that could easily be back in the top 25 before we know it.
All right, guys, and I think this week is going to kind of clear up the top 25 a little bit more. There's a lot of matchups. All right, guys, what are some matchups you're looking forward to tomorrow on Tuesday, Tim?
I'm looking forward to Medina and Beechwood. That's a good matchup within the top 21. Medina with John Teskey is going to be a huge test for a Beechwood team that doesn't really have a dynamic post presence defensively. But Beechwood has a lot of balance in their forward group. They got a bunch of guys between 6 foot and 6'5" that can really spread the ball around, do some good things. So I'm looking to see how that matches up.
Dave?
I'm looking at East Tech Glenville. I know that we just talked about how Glenville's got a little to figure out, but I feel like those Senate games always bring out the best in every team. And you saw on Friday, Rhodes was really gearing up for East Tech. They were leading at halftime. I think East Tech's going to get that all year long. Glenville's home. It could be a closer game than people think.
All right, I know we have the podcast coming up later in the week where we'll really break down Friday's games. But real quick, Dave, start with you. What's one game you're excited for Friday?
Man, there are just so many games when you look at Ed St. V, Warrensville Bedford, Holy Name VSJ, Garfield Menor, Holben Walsh. To me, man, I'm just gonna go with Ed St. V. It's two teams. Ed could be our #1 Division I team. St. V could be our #1 Division II team. The fact that we get to see him so early on, plus St. V, a lot of question marks. Like how do these guards stack up to compared to last year's team? We're gonna figure that out.
All right, Tim.
I'm going to go Garfield-Heights Menor because I've talked at that NOC Valley division. In the preseason, we saw how great it was last year, and not a bad way to start off with Garfield-Heights and that combo of Willie Jackson and Frankie Hughes going up against Menor and Micah Potter, the big man in the middle. See how well that matches up. And as we learned from last season, that NOC Valley division, pretty much every Friday night, you're guaranteed at least one marquee game. This is that marquee game on Friday night, and we get it only in the second week of the season.
And I think both of those games definitely have great storylines. Obviously, St. V, they do have a talented, quick backcourt that could potentially speed up St. Edward. And when you look at Garfield Heights, Tim, they weren't able to beat Menor last year, so I think it's something that we'll learn a lot about these teams and all throughout the rest of the week. So that will do it for this week's edition of the Boys Basketball Show. Tune in Thursday to the podcast. For Tim Bielik and David Cassilo, I'm Mark Kern.